bring in Rich Eisen of the NFL Network. Rich, if I said Goodfellas, Godfather, or the rest of the field of movies, what do you take?
I take Goodfellas and Godfather.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for joining us.
Is this like your own personal fight club, Dan? Is that what you're saying? You can't talk about it?
Sort of. Sort of.
That's mysterious.
I'm being respectful.
Yeah.
What's the movie that you're embarrassed to admit that you love?
Embarrassed to admit that I love. Wow. I don't think I'm embarrassed to admit that I love anything, Dan. I mean,
like I love E.T.
Oh, please. I would have, I was going to say that because right off the top, I cried at E.T. I cried like a child. I was a child, but even now, when I look at E.T., it's horrible. I don't even know when I should start showing it to my children. It breaks me up.
Home.
It breaks me up, Dan. You know what?
Be right here.
Yeah. It turns on my heart light. That's what it does. A lot of stuff does, though, and I'm not afraid to admit it.
When's the last time you cried at a movie?
When was the last time I cried at a movie? It was actually a week ago, Dan. The movie Enough Said. Have you seen it?
No.
It's with James Gandolfini and Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Yeah.
Really very, very good. And there's a scene where Julia Louis-Dreyfus is an empty nester taking her kid to school, to college, dropping her off at an airport. And that's all I kept thinking was my oldest, who is 5 and change, one day I'm going to do that too. And that really flipped me out. I'm a softie deep down, Dan.
I cried watching Hoosiers last night when Jimmy hits the jumper. I mean, how sad is that?
Yeah, I know.
I'm downstairs, and my wife comes down. She goes, "Why are you crying? You've seen this movie." So I said, it breaks me up.
Listen, I know you're talking about best movies of all time, and I would take Goodfellas and The Godfather against the rest of the field. But the best sports movie of all time and one of the best movies of all time is Hoosiers. I don't think you can come, I know that I'm sure you've had this discussion many times. I've had to, about the best sports movie of all time. I would take Hoosiers against the rest of the field on that front.
Well, there's a lot more to it. A lot of times, that sports is the metaphor, that you're watching a movie, but it's really about life, relationships. You have a father-son in Hoosiers. Yes. You have Gene Hackman, who's running from something that happened in Ithaca, New York. You have Barbara Hershey, who's there. Is she going to be accepting? And she's stuck, and, she's moving, lost her husband. So there's all of this stuff. Alcoholism is in there, how you teach kids,
yep.
The locals and how they see Gene Hackman, what he's trying to instill in them. And even that moment when they go to Butler Fieldhouse and they walked out there, and we did the same thing when we were there for the Super Bowl. The Danettes, we went over there and we reenacted it, but it was still unbelievable when you see where they shot it and then walk out there, and we actually measured 10 feet, and it's such a great building. Butler Fieldhouse is spectacular.
Well, that's a perfect also, that's not just applicable to sports, that philosophy of the rim is the same at home. It's still 10 feet high, and the baseline is still the same length to the free throw line. You could do that, and not to sound too hokey, but you could do that in any walk of life, with anything that anybody who's listening to us right now, that they're in a new job, they're in a new situation in their life. It's the same situation that you've been in before. It's just a bigger stage. And I've used that many times just to, calm my nerves or just to try and remind myself in certain situations that everything's going to work out just fine. I'm serious about that.
Well, that happened to me
me
in London at the Olympics, where the magnitude hits you and you don't know when it's going to hit you. And then you're on the air and you're realizing you're hosting the Olympics. And I had this wave of emotion that just smacked me right in the face, where I'm thinking about watching this when I'm a kid. And, that's when you had one TV and you had 3 channels and you have your family there and you're watching all of these events.
Yeah.
and then you're hosting it. And, I couldn't have prepared for it with the emotion, but it was there. And that's when you're going, you almost want to say it out loud because you're going, I came on the air and I'm thinking, as I'm reading off the camera, I'm hosting the Olympics.
Yeah, I've felt the same way. I've never hosted the Olympics, but yeah, I mean that scene is definitely something. And another one that I've used even on the air many times, because this is applicable in so many sports scenarios that we talk about, is the scene where Hackman keeps just 4 guys on the floor to make a point to not only his kids but to the fan base as he waves his game plan in the leather satchel that he holds it in. He waves it at the fans like, this is my philosophy. I'm going to stick to my guns. This is what works, even though you're howling from me here physically in my presence and no doubt for my job when I'm not around. This is what I believe in. And, I mean, how many times you see a head coach do that in this day and age? So I love that movie. It's perfect on almost every level.
He's Rich Eisen from the NFL Network joining us, Dan Patrick Show. Poll question first hour, did Richard Sherman have a good week?
Oh, yeah. I think he did. I mean, I'm sure there are times when he looks at his Twitter feed and he thinks it's not so much. And I'm sure he has reflected. Pete Carroll said that he told him what he thought, that what he did post-game took away from the team. And there are many people in America who think Richard Sherman is who he's not. It was a display of poor sportsmanship. There's no two ways about it. It may have been both ways, but Michael Crabtree didn't have that platform at the end of the game to express what Richard Sherman expressed in the manner that Richard Sherman expressed it. But all in all, more people know who he is now. So if he wants to use the platform, he can. And on top of it, his team's in the Super Bowl.
Well, who would you rather hear from on Media Day? Peyton Manning, Richard Sherman?
Oh, I'd rather hear from Peyton Manning. I mean, if I had to choose one or the other, what somebody.
Well, Peyton's not going to say anything.
No, I know that, but I mean, you still want to hear from the man going into this game of this magnitude with the legacy that's on the line. I mean, those are the storylines the narratives, to use his phrase, that we'll be discussing all week. Just hearing what his mindset is going in. I mean, that. I don't think Richard Sherman is somebody that doesn't have something to say. He is. I mean, you just hear his background, hear the way that he does talk when he's not full of emotion, pumped, full of adrenaline within 60 seconds of the biggest win of his life concluding. And you've been in Seattle, Dan. You can really lose your mind in that place. The way that the fans are and the intensity of it is. I'm not making any excuses for denigrating an opponent. I mean, there's no excuse for that.
Yeah,
in my
that was
mind,
wrong. Yeah.
I mean, if I'm sitting there watching that game with my kids, I'm like, that's not what we do after a game after you win. But we also saw that he did when he extended his hand at Crabtree at the end, and we heard him wired for sound. Yeah. As I heard on NFL Network last night, it did sound like he was legitimately saying "good game" to him.
Maybe.
Maybe. Because we just don't know the context in any of this stuff.
But I did want to ask you about this with TV experience here. Erin Andrews doing the interview, and it lasted 27 seconds.
Right.
So they didn't stay. It wasn't for a long period of time, but you grabbed him. Of all the people you could grab, you grabbed him so you knew what you were going to get. And then all of a sudden, they dump out of that. How surprised were you that after 2 questions that you dump out of Richard Sherman?
Well, the way we found out, I was on the air on Game Day Final with Marshall and Dion, and our news desk transcribed the comments, and I read it on the air. And hearing it from me, it sounded like I was on Falcon Crest. I mean, it's just hearing the way I read them verbatim did not give justice at all to Richard Sherman. And we debated it, and Dion said it's not right to denigrate an opponent. And then we played it. And just hearing how demonstrative it was, I mean, you just, I didn't think that, wow, they cut out of it too early. I was just so taken aback by how demonstrative and, loud he was.
Well, I got to stay on it I got to have one more question in there. But,
oh, sure.
But here's what Erin admitted, she kind of froze a little bit. Do you ask about the Super Bowl or do you stay in the moment with Crabtree? I got to stay with him.
Well, did we find out what whoever said that whoever hit the dump button, what the reasoning behind it was?
Erin said that they told her to get out, and I don't know if it was language with Richard Sherman, which
they were nervous about that.
I guess
I don't know.
That's what she said, but I don't know.
I just think again, I don't believe Richard Sherman's going to go on the air and curse.
I didn't think so either. I think it's a role he plays when he's on the field. This is Richard Sherman. When he's off the field, he's not Richard Sherman.
Some people were telling me that in the immediate aftermath, some people took it to mean when he said, I'll shut your mouth for you, he was referring to Erin.
I know.
And I never took it that way, but some people may have, and maybe whoever said dump out thought that too.
She thought it was awesome, so she wasn't scared, but people did ask her after, were you afraid?
Here's the way that he has come through it with, I believe, 500,000 more Twitter followers, and people like Hank Aaron tweeting in his giving him an attaboy on Twitter, and I look, Hank's only tweeted 8 times and hasn't tweeted since October. Okay, and his last tweet in October was retweeting Bill Clinton saying it was great to meet him. So more people know who he is, and Sean Payton, I think, tweeted him an attaboy last night. So he'll come through it. It's just going to be an interesting week because, and plus, if anybody thinks that the league is going to muzzle him, that's ridiculous because he is going to be made available every single time. And if he's not made available, it's only going to be at his and Seattle's choice.
Yep.
I mean, the minute he comes off the plane on Sunday, as you know, you're in front of a microphone. And then there's Wednesday availability, there's Thursday availability, there's sometimes Monday availability. That's the crazy thing about calling media day because every day is media day at the Super Bowl.
I got to run.
All right, DP.
All right, Rich. I will see you in New York. We'll have
I look forward to it.
Okay,
has the location been undisclosed?
West Side Highway, Pier 40. We built a skyscraper.
That's the way you roll. You and DirecTV, DP.
Thank you.
You do it up.
Thank you, buddy. That's Rich Eisen, NFL Game Day Morning, and Rich Eisen podcast on the NFL Network. This week's podcast, The Commish, Roger Goodell.